It was a quiet morning in the dusty plains of Arizona, where the sun stretched its golden fingers across the horizon and painted the world in hues of amber and rust. The air carried the faint scent of sagebrush mingled with the dry earth beneath boots worn thin by years of walking. A lone coyote howled somewhere far off, breaking the silence that had settled over the land like a heavy quilt. It was here, on this desolate stretch of wilderness, that John Callahan rose from his bed at dawn, as he always did, to tend to his ranch. The Callahan ranch wasn't grand or sprawling. It was modest, built with rough-hewn wood and patched together over decades of hard work. Its fence lines were weathered, its barn creaking under the weight of time, but it stood strong against the elements, much like its owner. John was a man who rarely spoke unless spoken to, preferring instead the company of his horse, Dusty, and his loyal dog. Max was an old hound, his fur mottled with gray streaks, his eyes clouded with age but still sharp enough to catch every movement around him. He had been John's companion for nearly a decade, and though many would say a rancher didn't need such attachments, John knew better. Max wasn't just a dog. He was family. As John stepped out onto the porch, squinting against the rising sun, he noticed something unusual. Max was already there, digging furiously at a patch of dirt near the edge of property, where the grass met the rocky terrain. This wasn't the first day John had seen his behavior. Max had been fixated on this particular spot for days now, returning to it again and again despite John's attempts to redirect him elsewhere. At first, John thought it was nothing more than a buried bone, or perhaps some small animal Max had caught wind of. But as the days passed, the persistence of the dog began to gnaw at John's curiosity. "Max!" John called out, his voice gravelly with sleep. The dog stopped mid-dig, turning his head toward John with those piercing eyes. For a moment, they locked gazes, and John felt a strange sensation in his chest, a mix of unease and intrigue. Then Max returned to his task, paws scraping furiously at the ground, as if whatever lay beneath was worth all the effort in the world. John sighed, running a hand through his unshaven face. "You're going to wear yourself out, boy," he muttered, though deep down he wondered what could possibly be so important. Little did he know, this simple act of digging would unravel secrets long buried, secrets that would change everything he thought he understood about his past. By mid-morning, John couldn't resist any longer. Armed with a shovel, he approached the spot where Max continued his relentless excavation. The ground was churned up, dirt scattered in uneven clumps around the area, evidence of the dog's determination. John knelt beside him, placing a hand on Max's shoulder to pause him for a moment. "All right, let's see what's got you so worked up," John said softly, though his tone masked the growing tension inside him. With deliberate movements, he began to dig alongside the dog, the shovel biting into the soil with each thrust. The sun beat down mercilessly, turned the air thick and oppressive, but John paid it no mind. His focus was singular, driven by a mixture of frustration and fascination. At first, there was nothing but loose dirt and rocks, the kind of debris one might expect to find anywhere in these parts. But then, after several minutes of digging, John struck something solid. The sound echoed faintly, barely audible above the rhythmic thud of the shovel, but enough to make John freeze. He leaned closer, brushing away the dirt with his hands until a glint of metal caught the sunlight. It was a ring, a rusty, tarnished wedding band, half buried in the soil. John stared at it, his breath catching in his throat. For a moment, he simply sat there, holding the object between trembling fingers, trying to process what it meant. It wasn't just any ring. It looked old, ancient even, with intricate engravings that had faded with time. Whoever had owned it must have cherished it deeply, for it bore the marks of love and loss. But why was it here? And why had Max been so determined to uncover it? Questions swirled in John's mind, each one more unsettling than the last. He glanced around the surrounding landscape, taking in the familiar sights of his ranch. The sagging fences, the rolling hills dotted with juniper trees, the distant shimmer of the river, winding lazily through the valley. Yet somehow, none of it felt quite the same anymore. There was a heaviness in the air, a sense of hidden truths waiting to be revealed. That evening, as the sky darkened and the stars emerged one by one, John sat alone on the porch, cradling the ring in his palm. Max lay at his feet, panting softly, his job finally done. The night was cool, the desert breeze carrying whispers of secrets untold. John gazed out into the darkness, his thoughts consumed by the mystery of the ring and the memories it stirred within him. He remembered his wife, Clara, though it had been years since she left him. She hadn't died, not exactly. No, Clara had walked away one fateful night, leaving behind only a note and the promise that she would return when the time was right. John had waited for her, year after year, until hope turned to resignation, and resignation to bitterness. Now, staring at the ring, he couldn't help but wonder if it held some connection to her, to their life together, or perhaps to the life she had chosen without him. But if it belonged to Clara, why had it been buried here, in this remote corner of the ranch? And who or what had placed it there? The questions haunted him, refusing to be silenced. Determined to uncover the truth, John resolved to dig deeper, not just physically, but emotionally. He knew he needed answers, not only for himself, but also for Max, whose unwavering loyalty had brought this puzzle to light. The next morning, John set out early, armed with a lantern and a renewed sense of purpose. He ventured beyond the boundaries of the ranch, following a trail that seemed almost invisible to anyone else but clear as day to him. The path led him to a grove of cottonwood trees near the riverbank, their leaves whispering secrets in the gentle breeze. It was here, among the roots of an ancient tree, that John found another clue, a scrap of fabric, yellow with age, tangled in the underbrush. Kneeling down, John carefully untangled the material, his heart pounding in his chest. It was a piece of silk, delicate and fragile, bearing the faintest trace of embroidery. Though faded with time, the pattern was unmistakable, a floral design that matched the gown Clara had worn on their wedding day. John's hands shook as he held it, the implications crashing over him like waves of storm. Clara had been here. Somehow, somewhere along the way, her presence had intersected with this place, leaving behind fragments of her story for John to piece together. But why? What had brought her here, and why had she left no word of it? As John pondered these questions, a shadow moved across the clearing. Startled, he spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for the revolver holstered at his side. But it wasn't an intruder. It was a figure, cloaked in darkness, emerging slowly from the trees. The silhouette hesitated, then stepped forward into the light. It was a woman, her face lined with age and sorrow, her eyes filled with recognition that made John's blood run cold. She introduced herself as Margaret, a neighbor from a nearby settlement who claimed to have known Clara well before she ever met John. "I saw her once," Margaret began, her voice soft yet steady. "Years ago, when I was younger and foolish. She came to me seeking refuge, crying and desperate, clutching this very ring in her hands. She told me things I never thought possible." John listened intently, his grip tightening on the ring as Margaret recounted a tale of betrayal and heartbreak. Clara, it seemed, had fled not because she wanted to leave John, but because she feared for her life. Someone from her past, a dangerous man with ties to outlaw gangs, had returned, threatening both her and anyone she cared about. In her desperation, Clara had chosen exile over endangering the man she loved. "But she didn't die?" John asked, his voice cracking with emotion. Margaret shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "No, she didn't die, but she disappeared. Some say she found safety in another town, while others believe she vanished into the wilderness, swallowed whole by the desert. Whatever happened, one thing is certain. She never forgot you, John. That ring is proof of it." As the weeks turned into months, John delved further into the mystery of Clara's disappearance. He traveled to neighboring towns, speaking to anyone who might have known her. Along the way, he uncovered pieces of her journey. A letter written in haste, a photograph taken secretly, a trail of breadcrumbs leading ever closer to the truth. And then one fateful day, he found her. She was alive, living under a new name in a quiet mining town nestled deep in the mountains. When John confronted her, their reunion was fraught with emotion. Tears and laughter, anger and forgiveness, all mingling together in a symphony of raw humanity. Clara explained everything, her voice breaking as she described the choices she had made and the sacrifices she had endured. In the end, they decided to start anew, building a life together that honored the love they had shared and the trials they had overcome. Max, ever faithful, welcomed Clara back with wagging tail and joyful barks, as if he too had known all along that their paths would cross again. And so, the ranch became a place of healing, where old wounds were mended and new beginnings took root. The ring, now polished and gleaming, was returned to its rightful place, a symbol of enduring love and the power of second chances. But little did they know, the true secret of the ring remained buried, waiting patiently for another time, another story, to reveal itself fully. As the days turned into weeks, John and Clara settled back into a rhythm that felt both familiar and new. The ranch buzzed with life once more, the silence that had enveloped it for so long finally broken by laughter and shared meals. Yet beneath the surface of their renewed bond lay an unspoken tension, a shadow that neither could fully shake off. It wasn't until much later, during one of those quiet nights under the vast expanse of stars, that Clara finally broached the subject. They were sitting on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the chill of the desert night. Max lay at their feet, his breathing steady and peaceful. Above them, the constellations twinkled like diamonds scattered across black velvet, each one telling its own ancient story. Clara's voice was barely audible over the distant hoot of an owl, but her words carried the weight of years. "There's something I haven't told you," she began, her gaze fixed on the horizon where the mountains loomed dark and silent. "Something about the ring." John stiffened, turning to look at her. "What do you mean?" he asked, his tone cautious. Clara hesitated, as if choosing her words carefully. Then she reached into the pocket of her shawl and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. Unfolding it slowly, she handed it to John. In the dim light, he could make out faint handwriting, the ink smudged and faded with time. "It was left with me when I sought refuge," she explained, "by the man who helped me escape. He said it belonged to someone else before us." John stared at the note, his heart pounding in his chest. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the message cryptic. Asterisk, "This belongs to her, but she will never claim it again. Keep it safe." Asterisk below was a signature, just an initial M. "Who is M?" John asked, his voice low and gravelly. Clara shook her head. "I don't know. That's all I ever learned. But there's more." She paused, her expression troubled. "The man who gave me this, the one who helped me flee, he warned me not to dig too deeply. He said some truths are better left buried." John's mind raced, piecing together fragments of information that refused to form a coherent picture. If the ring hadn't originally belonged to Clara, then whose was it? And why had it been entrusted to her? More importantly, what did it signify? Determined to uncover the truth, John embarked on another journey, this time venturing farther than ever before. He rode Dusty through desolate canyons and dusty trails, following leads that seemed tenuous at best. Along the way, he encountered strangers whose stories intertwined with his own in ways he couldn't have imagined. In a remote saloon nestled between jagged cliffs, he met a grizzled old prospector named Ezekiel. The man was known for spinning tales of gold rushes and ghost towns, but there was a glint in his eye that suggested he knew far more than he let on. Over a bottle of whiskey, Ezekiel regaled John with a story of a mysterious woman who had passed through these parts decades ago, a woman who wore a ring identical to the one John now carried. "She called herself Mary," Ezekiel murmured, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "But folks around here reckon she went by other names in other places. They say she ran afoul of some bad company, outlaws mostly, and they caught up to her in the end, buried her somewhere out yonder, along with whatever secrets she kept close to her heart." John listened intently, every muscle in his body tense. "Do you know where?" he pressed. Ezekiel shrugged, leaning back in his chair. "No one does. Not exactly. But there's talk of a hidden grave near the old mining camp up north. Folks say strange things happen out there. Lights flickering in the darkness, whispers carried on the wind. Could be nothing, or it could be something worth looking into." With no other leads to follow, John decided to investigate the abandoned mining camp. It was a perilous journey, fraught with danger and uncertainty, but the promise of answers drove him forward. When he arrived, the camp was eerily silent, its wooden structures crumbling under the weight of neglect. Vines snaked up the walls, obscuring windows and doors, while rusted tools lay scattered across the ground like relics of a forgotten era. It was here, amidst the ruins, that John discovered the first real clue. Carved into the bark of a dead tree was a symbol, a star encircled by a crescent moon. Beneath it, scrawled in fading ink, were the initials ML. ML? John whispered, his fingers tracing the letters. Could this be the same M from the note Clara had shown him? And if so, who was L? As days turned into weeks, John's search took him deeper into the wilderness, testing his resolve and pushing him to the brink of exhaustion. Along the way, he pieced together fragments of a story that spanned generations, a tale of love, betrayal, and redemption. Each revelation brought him closer to the truth, yet also deeper into a web of mystery that threatened to consume him entirely. And then one fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in hues of crimson and gold, John stumbled upon the final piece of the puzzle. Hidden within a hollow log, buried beneath layers of dirt and leaves, was a journal. Its pages were brittle with age, the ink smeared and blurred in places, but the writing was unmistakably personal. The entry spoke of a woman named Mary Lee, a wanderer who had crossed paths with countless souls during her lifetime. She wrote of loves won and lost, of friendships forged and shattered, and of a single moment that changed everything. The day she met a man who promised her the world, only to betray her in the cruelest way imaginable. Among the entries, John found a passage that sent chills down his spine. Asterisk, he gave me this ring, not as a token of love, but as a reminder of my place, a prisoner bound by chains of gold. But even as he tried to bury me, body and soul, I vowed never to let him win. Somewhere, someday, someone will find this and know the truth. Asterisk, tears pricked at John's eyes as he read the words, realizing the magnitude of what he held in his hands. The ring wasn't just a relic of Clara's past. It was a testament to a woman's courage in the face of unimaginable adversity. And now, after all these years, her story would finally see the light of day. When John returned to the ranch, Clara was waiting for him, her face etched with worry. Without saying a word, he handed her the journal. As she flipped through its pages, her eyes widened with understanding and then with sorrow. So many lives entwined, she murmured, her voice trembling. So many secrets waiting to be uncovered. Together, they made a decision to honor Mary Lee's memory by sharing her story with the world. They traveled to nearby towns, speaking to anyone who would listen, ensuring that her bravery would not be forgotten. And though the journey was long and arduous, it brought them closer together, forging a bond stronger than any they had known before. In the end, the ranch became more than just a place to live. It became a sanctuary for truths untold and dreams reborn. And as the years passed, John and Clara stood side by side, their hearts filled with gratitude for the second chance they had been given. Little did they know, however, that the true legacy of the ring stretched far beyond their lifetimes, weaving its way into the fabric of history itself. For in the Wild West, where legends were born and myths came alive, the story of Mary Lee would live on forever, inspiring generations to come. The days that followed were a blur of activity and emotion. John and Clara traveled from town to town, sharing the story of Mary Lee with anyone who would listen. They spoke in saloons filled with rowdy cowboys, in churches surrounded by solemn congregations, and even in dusty mining camps where men gathered around flickering lanterns. Each audience reacted differently, some with disbelief, others with awe, but all shared a common thread of fascination. One evening, as they sat by a campfire beneath a canopy of stars, Clara turned to John with a question that had been weighing on her mind. "Do you think we've done enough?" she asked, her voice soft yet tinged with uncertainty. "To honor her memory, I mean." John paused, staring into the flames as if searching for an answer within their dance. "I don't know if we ever can," he replied after a moment. "But every time someone hears her story, it's like she lives again. That has to count for something." Clara nodded, though her expression remained thoughtful. She glanced at the journal lying beside her, its cover worn from constant handling. "Still," she said, "there's so much we don't know about her life, about what really happened to her. Do you ever wonder?" John looked at her, understanding the unspoken question behind her words. He did wonder. The journal had provided glimpses into Mary Lee's world, but was far from complete. There were gaps in her story, mysteries left unsolved. And then there was a matter of M, the enigmatic figure whose presence loomed large over everything they had uncovered. "I do," John admitted, "but maybe some answers aren't meant to be found. Maybe some things are better left buried." Clara sighed, leaning back against the log they had claimed as their seat. "Or maybe," she countered gently, "we just haven't looked hard enough yet." Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For a while, neither spoke, content to let the fire crackle between them. But deep down, John knew she was right. There was still more to uncover, more truths waiting to surface. And perhaps in finding them, they might discover not only Mary Lee's full story, but also parts of themselves they hadn't yet acknowledged. Their next destination was a small frontier town, nestled in the foothills of the Rockies. It was a place John had heard whispers about during his travels, a settlement steeped in legend, where stories of old outlaws and forgotten heroes seemed to linger in the very air. As they rode dusty through its narrow streets, lined with wooden storefronts and bustling with townsfolk, John couldn't shake the feeling that this was where another piece of the puzzle awaited. They stopped first at the local saloon, a raucous establishment where laughter and shouts echoed off the walls. Inside, they found a crowd of miners and ranch hands gathered around a grizzled storyteller named Jasper. His tales, delivered with dramatic flair, captivated the room, drawing gasps and cheers in equal measure. When John approached him later, introducing himself and mentioning the name Mary Lee, Jasper's weathered face grew serious. "Mary Lee," he repeated slowly, stroking his beard as if trying to recall distant memories. "Now there was a woman, smart as a whip, beautiful as a sunrise. She came through here once, long before your time. Folks say she was running from something, though no one could figure out exactly what. Do you remember anything else?" Clara asked eagerly, leaning forward in her chair. Jasper scratched his head, lost in thought. "Well, now that you mention it." He leaned closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "There was talk of a man, tall, dark-haired, always dressed in black. Some called him Marcus. Others just referred to him as the Shadow. He was trouble, pure and simple. Word was, he'd been after Mary Lee for years, following her trail across half the country." John felt a chill run down his spine. Marcus. The same initial mention in the note Clara had shown him. Could this be the connection they had been searching for? What happened to him? Clara pressed, her eyes wide with anticipation. Jasper shrugged, a shadow crossing his face. "No one knows for sure. Some say he disappeared one night, never to be seen again. Others claim he met a violent end somewhere out in the wilderness. Whatever the truth is, folks around here prefer not to talk about it too much." As they left the saloon, John and Clara exchanged a glance loaded with significance. This new information added another layer to the mystery surrounding Mary Lee, and raised even more questions. Who was Marcus? Why had he pursued her so relentlessly? And what role had he played in her ultimate fate? Their search led them further north, to a remote valley shrouded in mist and mystery. According to local legends, this was the site of an ancient burial ground, a place where spirits roamed freely and secrets lay buried beneath layers of earth and time. It was here, among the towering pines and whispering winds, that John stumbled upon the most unexpected discovery yet. While exploring the area, he noticed a peculiar marking etched into the bark of a massive tree. It was the same symbol they had encountered earlier, the star encircled by a crescent moon. Beneath it, carved deeply into the wood, were two names, Mary Lee and Marcus Blackwood. Clara joined him moments later, her breath catching as she read the inscription. "Marcus Blackwood," she murmured, her voice barely audible. "So that's his full name." John nodded, his mind racing. The connection was undeniable, but what did it mean? Had Mary Lee and Marcus known each other intimately? Or was their relationship one of conflict and betrayal? As they examined the tree more closely, they noticed something else, a hollow cavity hidden beneath a tangle of roots. Carefully, John reached inside, his fingers brushing against something cold and metallic. Pulling it free, he revealed a small metal box, its surface corroded with age. Inside the box were several items: a lock of hair tied with ribbon, a folded letter yellowed with time, and a photograph showing a young couple standing side by side. Though faded, the resemblance was unmistakable. It was Mary Lee and Marcus, captured together in a moment of apparent happiness. Clara took the photo in trembling hands, her eyes filling with tears. "They loved each other," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Once upon a time, they must have loved each other." John didn't respond immediately, his thoughts swirling with conflicting emotions. Love, betrayal, loss. It was all there, written plainly in the artifacts before them. Yet the full picture still eluded him, fragmented and incomplete. Back at the ranch, John spent countless nights poring over the contents of the box, piecing together fragments of Mary Lee and Marcus's story. The letter, written in hurried handwriting, revealed a desperate attempt to reconcile, a final plea for forgiveness and understanding. It ended abruptly, as if interrupted mid-sentence, leaving behind only unanswered questions. And then one fateful evening, John made a discovery that changed everything. Hidden within the folds of the letter was a map, drawn in ink so faint it was nearly invisible. The map depicted a series of landmarks leading to a specific location deep within the desert, a place marked simply with the words asterisk, "Here lies truth." Asterisk. His heart pounding, John showed the map to Clara. Together, they studied it, tracing the routes with trembling fingers. It was clear what they had to do. They had to follow it, to uncover whatever lay at its endpoint, for better or worse. The truth was calling them, pulling them inexorably toward its revelation. The journey was arduous, testing their endurance and resolve at every turn. They crossed treacherous terrain, battled searing heat and biting cold, and faced dangers both natural and human. Along the way, they encountered signs that suggested others had walked this path before them. Broken arrows lodged in trees, abandoned campfires smoldering in hidden valleys, and faint footprints disappearing into the sand. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they arrived at the destination marked on the map. It was a secluded canyon, its walls rising sharply on either side and casting long shadows across the ground. At its center stood a solitary stone monument, weathered by time and covered in moss. Approaching cautiously, John brushed away the debris obscuring the monument's surface. Carved into the stone were words that sent chills down his spine. Asterisk, in memory of Mary Lee and Marcus Blackwood, united in love, divided by fate. May their spirits rest peacefully. Asterisk, below the inscription was a date, decades earlier than John had expected. Suddenly, the pieces clicked into place. Mary Lee and Marcus hadn't been enemies. They had been lovers torn apart by circumstances beyond their control. Their tragic story had been buried alongside them, waiting patiently for someone to uncover it and give it voice. As John and Clara stood before the monument, the weight of their discovery settled heavily upon them. They had come seeking answers, but what they found was so much more, a testament to the enduring power of love, even in the face of insurmountable odds. And yet, as they prepared to leave the canyon, John couldn't help but feel that the story wasn't truly over. Somewhere, somehow, the echoes of Mary Lee and Marcus's lives continued to resonate, weaving themselves into the fabric of history, and inspiring those who came after them. Little did they know, however, that the true legacy of their journey stretched far beyond the confines of the Wild West, touching hearts and minds across generations. For in a world defined by struggle and sacrifice, the tale of two souls bound by love and tragedy would live on forever, reminding all who heard of the timeless power of the human spirit. The days that followed were marked by a quiet solemnity, as if the very air around the ranch carried the weight of the truths John and Clara had uncovered. They returned home with heavy hearts, yet also a profound sense of fulfillment. The story of Mary Lee and Marcus Blackwood had been brought to light, their names no longer lost to the sands of time. But as they settled back into the rhythm of life on the ranch, neither could shake the feeling that there was still more to be discovered. More layers to this intricate tapestry of love, loss, and redemption. One morning, as the sun cast its golden glow over the rolling hills, John found himself drawn to the same spot where Max had first begun his relentless digging. The dog, now older and slower in his movements, lay nearby, watching John with those wise, clouded eyes. As John knelt beside the patch of earth, his fingers brushed against something smooth and cold buried just beneath the surface. Pulling it free, he held it up to the light, a small locket, tarnished but intact. Clara joined him moments later, her breath catching as she saw the object in his hand. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John opened the locket carefully, revealing 2 tiny portraits inside. One of Mary Lee, her face framed by dark curls, and another of Marcus, his expression somber yet tender. Beneath the portraits was an inscription, "Forever entwined, even when apart." For a long moment, neither spoke, the significance of the find sinking in. This wasn't just a keepsake. It was a piece of Mary Lee and Marcus's enduring bond, a symbol of their unbreakable connection despite the trials that sought to tear them apart. That evening, as the stars began to twinkle in the vast expanse above, John and Clara gathered around the fire pit, the locket resting between them on the wooden table. Max lay nearby, his head resting on his paws, as if sensing the gravity of the moment. The flickering flames cast dancing shadows across their faces, illuminating expressions filled with both sorrow and wonder. "I think we've only scratched the surface," Clara said finally, her voice soft but resolute. "There's still so much about them we don't know. Their lives, their struggles. Maybe it's not enough to just tell their story. Maybe we need to understand it fully." John nodded, his gaze fixed on the locket. "And maybe," he added, "we need to find closure, not just for them, but for ourselves too. Every truth we uncover brings us closer to understanding who we are and why we're here." With renewed determination, they decided to delve deeper into the past, using the clues they had gathered thus far to piece together the fuller picture of Mary Lee and Marcus's lives. Over the coming weeks, they scoured old archives, consulted historians, and traveled to distant towns, piecing together fragments of information from people whose families had known Mary Lee or Marcus, or both. In one dusty library, tucked away in a corner of a forgotten frontier town, they stumbled upon a journal entry written by a preacher who had officiated a secret wedding ceremony decades ago. The couple, described only as a woman with a heart of gold and a man with a soul burdened by regret, had come to him seeking solace and sanctuary. The preacher had blessed their union, performing the ceremony under cover of darkness to protect them from those who sought to harm them. "This must have been them," Clara whispered, her eyes glistening with tears. "They were married. Even after everything, they chose each other." John squeezed her hand, his own emotions raw. "It makes me wonder," he said, "if their story wasn't just about tragedy. Maybe it was also about hope, about finding love even in the darkest times." Their journey took them further afield than ever before, leading them to places they had never imagined visiting. In a remote canyon, they discovered a hidden cave adorned with carvings depicting scenes of joy and sorrow, images of laughter, tears, and ultimately sacrifice. Among the carvings was a depiction of a couple standing hand in hand, surrounded by symbols of unity and protection. In another town, they met an elderly woman whose grandmother had once worked as a midwife. She recounted stories of a young woman who had given birth alone in the wilderness, hiding her child from those who would seek to take it away. Though the details were sparse, John and Clara couldn't help but feel a connection to Mary Lee, wondering if this might have been part of her untold story. Each revelation added depth to the narrative, painting a picture of resilience and courage in the face of overwhelming adversity. And yet, for every answer they found, new questions emerged. Who had raised Mary Lee's child? If indeed she had one, what had become of Marcus after his supposed disappearance? And most importantly, how had their fates intertwined so deeply that even death could not sever their bond? As autumn gave way to winter, the ranch became a place of reflection and remembrance. John and Clara spent countless evenings sitting by the fire, sharing the stories they had uncovered with anyone who visited. Word spread quickly through the surrounding towns, drawing curious listeners eager to hear the tale of Mary Lee and Marcus. Some came out of fascination, others moved by the themes of love and sacrifice, left with tears streaming down their faces. But the most unexpected reaction came from a young boy named Tommy, whose family lived on a neighboring farm. Tommy, wide-eyed and full of wonder, approached John one day with a question that stopped him in his tracks. "Mr. Callahan," the boy began hesitantly, "do you think Mary Lee and Marcus are still together? Like, in heaven or wherever they go after they die?" John stared at the boy for a moment, taken aback by the innocence and sincerity of the question. Then, slowly, he smiled. "I like to think so," he replied. "I like to think that wherever they are, they've found peace. And maybe, just maybe, they're watching over us." Tommy grinned, clearly satisfied with the answer, before running off to join his friends. Watching him go, John felt a warmth spread through his chest, a reminder of the power of storytelling to connect people across generations. Spring arrived, bringing with it the promise of renewal. The ranch flourished, its fields green and lush, its animals healthy and thriving. Max, though slowing with age, remained ever vigilant, his presence a constant source of comfort. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, John and Clara stood side by side on the porch, looking out over the land they had come to cherish so deeply. "We did it," Clara said softly, her voice carrying a note of awe. "We gave them a voice. We made sure they weren't forgotten." John turned to her, his eyes reflecting the fading light. And in doing so, he said, "We found our own voices too, our own stories." As they embraced, the wind carried whispers through the trees, mingling with the cries of distant coyotes and the rustle of leaves. It was as if the spirits of Mary Lee and Marcus lingered nearby, grateful and at peace. Little did they know, however, that the true legacy of their journey stretched far beyond the confines of the Wild West. For in a world defined by struggle and sacrifice, the tale of two souls bound by love and tragedy would live on forever, inspiring all who heard to seek out their own truths and to embrace the beauty of the human spirit, even in the face of insurmountable odds.